you need to have a sense of what the minimum and maximum values are to establish your stems for the set of data. Now this is a small enough sample, uh, so it looks like, and it's also arranged in order. So 35 would be my smallest value, and 77 would be my largest value. But if you're not sure, I'll just type in min here. You can actually, if you type in equals min and highlight the data, it'll spit out what the minimum is. It seems like an unnecessary step in this instance, but that's only because the data set is so small. If it were larger, then you might consider using this technique. All right. I also did a little formatting thing here, like max, for example, in this little drop down. I select right justified, just to kind of make it look a little nicer. So equals max, and we go to our array of data. You can close the parens or not. Doesn't make a difference in this case because it's only the individual command. And so enter, we get 77. What that tells me to do is take, since it's a set of two-digit numbers, stem values going from 3 to 7. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right. Now you see here where I have the NA. I got a little starter code in here. This will all be saved, and you can use it as needed. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a repeat of the number 0, and this is the key to everything, all right? Because it's saying count if M3 to M16, and we'll count if what, so that's part of the fun. Count if that value is in the 30s, all right? Specifically the number 30. So I'd have to make a statement regarding that, all right? So I've established that it's going from M3 to M16. By putting the dollar signs in there, I'm locking those references. So if I do a copy paste, it's not going to change on me, right? But I need this to only count the 30s and then repeat the number 0 for every 30 that's there, all right? So, and you might say, why 30? The lowest number is 35. We have to account for every number. If a stem is 3, every number between 30 and 39, all right? So I have my stem here. That's P6. If I multiply that by 10, that'll get me a 30. And, I can close it up here to check. I don't think I need that many closed parens. And it didn't put anything there because there are no 30s. Now, let me just show you really quickly what would happen if I made this a 35, for example. All right, so P6 times 10 plus 5. It would put a 30 there because there's 135, but in that case, I'd want this to say 5. So my command works. I just need it to go from 0 to 39, all right? So right now I'm good to go with my first command, but I also need it to account for any instance. So I'm going to copy this. I missed the R there, so Command C, or Control C if you're on a PC. I'm going to use an AND, make this a 1, and make this a 1. So that's the number 31. All right, always referencing P6 so that when I move it down the line, it'll change to P7, P8, P9, and P10. All right, so I'll hit enter to make sure it works. It's not supposed to produce anything, so that seems to mean that it does work, but we won't really know until we get to 35. All right, so this becomes a 2. So does this. Throw in an AND. A 3, a 3, throw in an AND, a 4, a 4. I'll stop at 5 in a second just to make sure. So this is 5 right here. You'll notice how I expanded this area here so that I'd have room to see multiple lines. It's a convenience thing. All right. So I hit enter on that, and a 5 appears. All right, so I'm on the right track here. So 6. And really, this is a template for everything that follows. So a lot of this is irrelevant, but, or at least for this part of it, but it won't always be irrelevant, and it'll be a time saver down the line. So I'm up to 8. And one more. So an and. Let's get the 9 in there. All right, enter. I got my leaf. So now if I take this and drag it down, I have all my leaves corresponding with my individual stems. So then the only thing that would remain is making a key. All right, so I would just make a little note, a key. In this case, let's say 3 vertical slash 5 is equal to 35. All right. And just so this isn't really taking up too much space, I'll bring that back up a little bit. All right, but now this is copy pastable and you could use it for other applications. All right, so I guess I don't need to be in there. I'll give you a little walkthrough on how to create certain types of statistical graphs on Excel or, in this case, Google Sheets. So the first one we're going to start off with would be the pie chart. So I'm going to copy, or highlight, I should say, then go to Insert, Chart, and if everything looks like it should, then you're good to go. All right, so the biggest sector here should be associated with juniors. That looks like that's the case. It covers 28% as opposed to 27%. It's not that much bigger than seniors, so yeah, I think we're in good shape here. The only thing I would change here is the title. Make it number of students. Oh, I'm sorry. Change it from number of students to students at JJHS, or just JJHS if you want. All right. So that's what I'll do there. You know what? I'll say JJHS students. All right. Seems reasonable. All right. So that's. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't scroll away so quickly. So that's the pie chart. Probably the easiest one to make. Histogram's pretty easy to make also. But for the dot plot, it's a little trickier. All right, what we need to do is we need to rank each of the values. So basically, you have repetition here. So, except for the 0 and maybe another value along the way. I think it's just a 0 that doesn't repeat. So what we want to do is not only take into account how many values there are, but what position in the sequence a number occupies. All right. So 0 is just, it's the only value. There's only one value that's 0. All right. But there are 3 values that are 2s. This is my first 2, my second 2, and my third 2. There are 2 values that are 3. This is my first 3. This is my second 3. There are 4 values that are 4s, so this is my first, second, third, and fourth 4. All right. Following the same idea, we would say 1 and 2 for the 5s, the first 5, the second 5. There is only one 6, so that's my other singleton. There are 4 7s, so I need a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. 2 9, so 1 and 2. 2 13, so 1 and 2. The first 13 and the second 13. All right. So what we do is we highlight the information. Go to Insert. The chart here should be, well, they defaulted to a histogram, but we want it to be scatter. All right. So it says histogram of how to make a dot plot. I don't know that I love that. So I'm going to change that. You know, if you click on the title, it brings you to the appropriate area to make an edit. You could say dot plot of runs scored. That would be perfectly fine. Or you could just say dot plot, or you could leave it blank, because the horizontal axis really gets across the idea there. All right, how to make a dot plot on the vertical axis, that doesn't make sense. All right, so this would be frequency. All right, you could also leave it blank because it's pretty clear what the numbers represent, but frequency seems to make sense. It's not a frequency histogram, but it is a measure of how frequent a number occurs. Right? I'm looking at the point here that is just getting cut off. So what I want to do is I want to customize it, but I want to make sure that I go far enough to see all the data points. All right. So if I go, I mean, there's a couple of things that I can do. I mean, you could just go through each of the drop downs here and see, what makes sense and what doesn't. All right. So a legend would be, a key to interpret the graph. I think everything is pretty straightforward here. The horizontal axis, if you look at it, it says slant labels and things like that. It's not something that we need. You could also establish a min and a max. For the horizontal, I don't know that I need that because all of the points horizontally seem to fit. It's just vertically that we're having a problem. So let me go to vertical axis and make the minimum value something bigger than 4, like 5, for example. Now everything fits, and it's really just a question of the grid lines, whether you want them there or not. It really doesn't make a difference in the end. But you could turn them off so it looks more like a traditional looking dot plot. So if you go into grid lines and ticks, you can drop down between horizontal axis, vertical axis, just deselect major grid lines. The only thing is I'm missing the horizontal axis now. All right, so if I go to horizontal axis, you see that there's nothing here that'll make that adjustment. So it is one of the grid lines. The problem is, if I bring them all back, whether it's horizontal and vertical, yeah, that x-axis will show up, but then all those other horizontal lines will show up. But in the end, I mean, it's not really that big of a deal because it does help give you a sense of scale. So that I think it's perfectly fine to leave those horizontal line segments in there. All right, so that's the dot plot. So what I'm going to do is highlight the relevant information, no names required, insert chart. Default setting, the default setting is that of a histogram, so we're in good shape. We want to customize it a little bit because this one has it going from 40 to 46.67, then to and so on from there. I want to have it be a little bit more reasonable in terms of the domain. All right, so you could play around with the chart style, stuff like that. The bucket size is where we want to be. So if you go into histogram, each one of these horizontal distances here is known as the bucket. And so what we're doing is we're filling the bucket with frequency values. So I want my bucket, well, my lowest value should be in the neighborhood of 40, but if you're unsure, you could always do a max min. So equals min, just so you don't have to look through, you could see that the minimum value is 42, and then do the same thing for the maximum so you know where you're living in terms of beginning and end to the histogram, or at least the horizontal axis. All right, so lowest value 42, highest value 78. These are not things that you would need to submit, it's just for your own reference. All right, so we can right click, because once I click out of there, I could right click to get into the editors. All right, this is kind of like a more streamlined version of it. I could, you could play around with some of these. You click on chart area, chart style. If you go to chart style, well, really anything other, I believe anything other than that first option, it'll bring you right back into the customized menu. All right, so the bucket size here, I want that to be, I think 10 would be fine. All right, so that gives me intervals of 10 years. All right, so 40 to a little bit less than 50, 50 to a little bit less than 60, and so on. All right, so I have everything accounted for, and I can see that the most popular, not that they're asking, but the most popular age group, or the most frequent age group, would be in the 50s, basically 50 to 59. All right, But then you can also play around with, you don't want these horizontal lines to show up or whatever. It doesn't make a difference on my end one way or the other, but we do need a label for the vertical axis. All right, so we go to chart and axis titles. We go to vertical axis title, and we call that frequency. That's labeled up nicely for us. Age at inauguration. That's the horizontal axis. I mean, that's what those values are. And the title, histogram of age at inauguration, that seems reasonable to me also. 5-number summary. Minimum, we just did something like that. So min, max, all right. I have it set to go to 1 decimal place, just in case we get a half value. All right, so to alter that, we can use one of these two keys: decrease decimal places, increase decimal places. All right. So for the lower quartile, we're going to go equals quartile. We want the .exc, the exclusive one. All right. It excludes 0 and 1 as proportional values, so that fits with the way we do it in class. So highlight the information and then indicate what quartile you're looking for, in this case quartile 1. All right. For the median, you could do it as quartile 2, or you could just use the median function. All right, so median, and then it makes a suggestion, but I'm not going to listen to that suggestion. I'm going to use the actual data set. All right, and then upper quartile. So same idea as lower quartile, equals quartile .exe, indicate the data range and what quartile you're looking for, which would be the 3rd quartile. All right, and you can verify as you go through the data set that seems to be correct. So we have a minimum value here. We have the 67 as the lower quartile, so it's one of these values here. That looks like it's about a quarter of the way through. 71.5, that would be halfway between 71 and 72. 76 is probably one of these guys, maybe both of them. And then the maximum value. All right, double highlighted there, so I'm going to get rid of that. So it looks like it's about a quarter of the way through for the first one, and halfway through for the second. You know, you can count boxes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 values make up the lower half of data. So the halfway point here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's going to be this one only. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so I can get rid of this. So it looks like every 7th value leads to a quartile. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the next one would be the upper quartile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this one is not making up the quartile, but they were duplicate values, so it's easy to think that that might be the case. But it looks like we have a quarter of the data here. I could even highlight in a different color to make it a little obvious, a little bit more obvious. A quarter of the data here. Let's go that. A quarter of the data here. Let's go with light purple. And a quarter of the data here. Right, I guess I could repeat colors, I should say, with the median being between these two numbers, 71 and 72. All right, so it looks like that needs to be made before we could actually make the graph would be to give this row of data points a title. That title would be temperatures, so I'm just going to throw that in here. Then I'm going to highlight the title and also the 5-number summary and go to insert. I'm going to go to chart, I'm going to go down. I don't want a column chart. I'm going to go down to one that looks like a box plot. That's the candlestick chart. And it produces something for us, which is really nice. All right, so it has temperatures, and it also has, as the horizontal axis, and then it has particular values, and you can see almost everything is squished in there. All right, you can go to customize and look up the different options, chart and axis titles. For the vertical axis, I mean, that honestly, that probably should be temperatures, with the horizontal axis being something other than that, because it really doesn't play a role, the horizontal axis, because we're kind of looking at a box plot sideways here. All right, so, but it does say temperature, so I'm fine with it. As long as it says temperature somewhere, it's perfectly fine. All right, yeah, same thing with horizontal axis, vertical axis, and the grid line and tick marks. This is all customizing stuff. If we want to adjust the count, we can, instead of going by, what is this, 20s? We can include little grid lines there to help us get a little bit of a better sense of scale. All right, so that I leave up to you. As long as you have the appropriate shape, you're fine. The one thing that we're going to run into here is the idea that we're not going to be able to see the median, right? And there really is no easy way to put that in there. So so as long as you have the general shape, the interquartile range extending out to the extremes, you're fine. If you do want to play around with the vertical axis, instead of going from 0 up, let's say you want to go from 60, you could do that, make it a little nicer. 80 is fine. But since the temperatures don't go below 60, we probably wouldn't want to have that there. But as long as you come up with a box plot on the graph, you're going to be okay. All right, so I'm just going to slide this over here, do a little resize, and just kind of tuck it in right here. All right, so that's our box plot.